They say the heart knows no boundaries, but what happens when the line between love and family blurs in ways you never expected? I'm 50 years old, a mother, a psychologist, and a woman who thought she'd seen it all. My life revolves around my adopted son, Leo, who's 23 and the brightest part of my world. We live together in a cozy apartment filled with sunlight, plants, and the kind of warmth that makes you forget the chaos outside. It's just us, and honestly, that's enough. I used to chase love, flitting from one disappointing date to another, hoping to find someone who could fill the quiet spaces in my heart. But after years of heartbreak, I gave up. Men stopped mattering. Leo, though, he's different. He's my anchor, my joy, and sometimes I wonder if our roles have flipped in ways they shouldn't. But it feels right, doesn't it? When something feels this good, how can it be wrong? I work at a local high school, counseling teenagers through their dramas and dreams. It's rewarding but exhausting. My days are filled with listening to kids navigate crushes, insecurities, and family fights, all while I nod and offer wisdom I've gathered from my own messy life. By the time I get home, I'm drained, but Leo's always there, his warm smile lighting up the apartment like a beacon. He works online, some tech job I don't fully understand, something about coding or design. He's brilliant, independent, and far more successful than I was at his age. Sometimes I catch myself staring at him, marveling at the man he's become. He's tall, with dark hair that falls into his eyes, and a quiet confidence that makes people notice him. But he doesn't seem to care about that. He cares about me. Our relationship is close, closer than most, I suppose. We cook dinner together, laugh over old movies, and talk about everything from philosophy to the ridiculous gossip at my school. He's my best friend, my confidant, and in some ways my protector. I know it sounds strange, but there's a comfort in the way he looks after me. He'll fix a leaky faucet, make sure I've eaten lunch when I'm buried in work, or just sit with me in silence when I'm too tired to talk. Sometimes I think he's the one taking care of me, not the other way around. And I let him. Maybe I shouldn't, but I do. One evening, we were sprawled on the couch, a half-empty pizza box between us. I was venting about a particularly tough day at work. A student had a breakdown, and I felt like I hadn't helped enough. Leo listened, his eyes soft and attentive, the way they always are when I'm unraveling. As I talked, he reached over and stroked my arm. His touch gentle but deliberate. It wasn't unusual for us to be affectionate. Hugs, a hand on the shoulder, a quick kiss on the forehead, but something about that moment felt different. His fingers lingered, warm against my skin, and I felt a flicker of something I couldn't name. I pushed it away, telling myself it was nothing. Just a mother and son, closer than most. But that moment stayed with me. It planted a seed of curiosity, one I wasn't sure I wanted to water. The next day, as we sat at the kitchen table, I decided to ask him something I'd been wondering for a while. "Leo," I said, stirring my coffee, "why don't you date? You're young, successful, handsome. There must be someone out there who catches your eye." He looked up from his laptop, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he smiled, a slow, almost shy smile that made my chest tighten. "I've never liked anyone more than you," he said simply. His voice steady but soft. The words hit me like a wave. My breath caught, and I felt heat rising in my cheeks. I laughed it off, brushing it away as a sweet compliment, but inside something shifted. His words echoed in my mind all day, stirring feelings I didn't know how to process. Was he just being kind? Was it the gratitude of a son for his mother? Or was there something more, something I wasn't ready to face? I needed to clear my head. Our apartment, as warm and safe as it was, suddenly felt too small, too full of questions I didn't want to answer. So, the next morning I suggested we get away for a bit. "Let's go to the lake," I said, trying to sound casual. "There's this quiet spot I used to visit years ago. We could have a picnic, relax, just be." Leo's face lit up. That sounds perfect, he said, already grabbing his fishing gear from the closet. I'll pack the cooler. You pick the snacks. I smiled, relieved that he was excited. A change of scenery would help, I told myself. It would reset whatever strange tension had crept into our dynamic. We'd laugh, eat, and come back home with clearer heads. That's what I needed. Boundaries, clarity, a reminder of who we were to each other. The drive to the lake was peaceful, the kind of day where the sky is so blue it almost hurts to look at it. Leo played his favorite playlist, a mix of indie rock and old jazz that somehow suited him perfectly. We sang along, windows down, the wind tangling my hair. For a while I felt like myself again, just a mom spending a day with her son. But as we pulled up to the lake, a secluded spot surrounded by tall pines and shimmering water, I couldn't shake the feeling that this trip might not be the reset I'd hoped for. We set up our picnic blanket under a tree, the air warm and fragrant with summer. Leo unpacked his fishing rod, his movements quick and practiced, while I laid out sandwiches, fruit, and a bottle of chilled white wine. The lake was calm, reflecting the sky like a mirror, and for a moment I felt at peace. We ate, talked, and laughed, the tension from the previous days fading into the background. Leo was his usual self, charming, funny, attentive. He complimented my sundress, saying the blue brought out my eyes, and I blushed, waving him off. "You're too much," I said, sipping my wine. "Only for you," he replied, his tone light but his eyes serious. I looked away, focusing on the water. I needed to keep things simple, to hold on to the boundaries that defined us. But as the day went on, those boundaries felt less like walls and more like threads, fragile and ready to snap. By late afternoon, the sun was high, and I was feeling playful, the wine loosening my inhibitions. "I'm going for a swim," I announced, standing up and kicking off my sandals. The lake looked inviting, cool and clear, and I wanted to feel weightless for a while. Leo grinned, setting down his fishing rod. "You sure? That water's probably freezing." "Scared to join me?" I teased, already wading in. He laughed, pulling off his shirt and following me. The water was cold, but it felt alive against my skin. I splashed him, giggling like a kid, and he retaliated, chasing me through the shallows. We were joking, splashing, our laughter echoing across the lake. For a moment we weren't mother and son or even friends. We were just two people, free and happy, lost in the moment. But as the sun began to dip, casting golden light across the water, something changed. Leo's laughter softened, his gaze lingering on me in a way that made my pulse quicken. I tried to ignore it, to keep the playful energy, but the air between us felt charged, heavy with something unspoken. I told myself we could keep the boundaries. I told myself this was just a day at the lake. But deep down, I knew we were standing on the edge of something neither of us could take back. That day at the lake was supposed to be a reset, a chance to clear the fog that had settled between us after his words the other night. "I've never liked anyone more than you." I'd laughed it off, but those words had rooted themselves in my mind, blooming into questions I wasn't ready to answer. The lake, with its quiet beauty and solitude, was meant to remind us of who we were. Mother and son, nothing more. Instead, it was doing the opposite, drawing us closer in ways I hadn't anticipated. We'd spent the morning eating, talking, and laughing on our picnic blanket. Leo had fished for a while, his focus intense but his glances frequent, each one accompanied by a compliment that made my cheeks warm. "You look happy today," he'd said, or, "That dress is perfect on you." I'd brushed them off, blaming the wine for the flutter in my stomach. But as we played in the water, joking and splashing like kids, the boundaries I'd clung to started to dissolve. We weren't just mother and son anymore. We were two people, caught in a moment that felt dangerously alive. Now, as the sun dipped lower, I waded deeper into the lake, the water lapping at my waist. "Come on, Leo," I called, my voice teasing. "Don't tell me you're tired already." He laughed, following me, his strides long and easy. Tired? Never. You're the one who's gonna beg for a break. I splashed him again, and he lunged forward, catching my wrist in a playful grip. We stumbled, giggling, the water swirling around us. For a second we were close, too close. His hand still on my wrist, his face inches from mine. His eyes softened, and I saw something there I couldn't ignore. Affection, yes, but also something deeper, something that mirrored the heat rising in me. I pulled away, laughing to cover the sudden rush of nerves. "Let's dry off," I said, wading back toward the shore. My heart was pounding, and I needed a moment to breathe, to anchor myself. Leo followed, and we collapsed onto the picnic blanket, the warmth of the sun soaking into our damp skin. I poured us both more wine, hoping the familiar ritual would ground me. We sat in silence for a while, watching the lake, the only sounds the soft lapping of water and the distant call of a bird. "You're quiet," Leo said eventually, his voice gentle. He was lying back on the blanket, one arm behind his head, his eyes on me. "Just thinking," I replied, sipping my wine. "It's nice here. Peaceful." "Yeah," he said, but his tone suggested he knew there was more. He always knew. "You okay?" I nodded, but the question hung between us. Was I okay? I wasn't sure. The closeness we shared, the way he looked at me, the way I felt when he touched my arm or said something sweet, it was all blurring lines I'd spent years drawing. I was his mother, even if not by blood. I'd raised him, loved him, built a life around him. But the way my heart raced when he smiled, the way I craved his presence, wasn't motherly. It was something else, and it terrified me. "Leo," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "What you said the other night. About not liking anyone more than me. What did you mean?" He sat up, his expression serious but not guarded. "I meant what I said," he replied, his eyes steady on mine. "You're the most important person in my life. Always have been. I don't need anyone else." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that made my chest tighten. I wanted to ask more, to dig deeper, but I was afraid of what I'd find. Instead, I smiled, reaching out to ruffle his hair like I used to when he was younger. "You're too sweet," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "But you're young. You should be out there, meeting people, falling in love." He caught my hand, holding it gently. "I'm right where I want to be," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. The air between us felt electric, charged with something I couldn't name. I pulled my hand back, laughing nervously. "You're gonna make me blush," I said, standing up to busy myself with packing the picnic basket. I needed movement, distraction, anything to break the intensity of the moment. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of small talk and shared smiles, but the undercurrent was there, undeniable. We packed up as the sun began to set, the sky streaked with pink and orange. Leo carried the cooler to the car, and I folded the blanket, stealing glances at him. He was so sure of himself, so at ease, while I felt like I was unraveling. What was happening to us? And why wasn't I stopping it? The drive home was quieter, the playlist softer, the windows up. Leo reached over at one point, resting his hand on mine where it lay on the gearshift. It was a small gesture, one he'd done 100 times, but it felt different now. Deliberate, intimate. I didn't pull away. I told myself it was nothing, just a moment of affection between us. But deep down I knew better. That night as I lay in bed, the lake day replayed in my mind. The laughter, the water, the way Leo's eyes had held mine. I tried to rationalize it, to tell myself it was just a phase, a fleeting intensity born of our closeness. But the truth was, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. And that scared me more than anything. I thought the lake would give us clarity, but it only pulled us closer. We were teetering on the edge of something new, something forbidden, and I didn't know how to step back, or if I even wanted to. That day by the water had been intoxicating. We'd laughed, splashed, and shared moments that felt like they belonged to a different kind of story. Not a mother and son, but two people caught in a current neither could resist. His compliments, his lingering glances, the way his hand felt on mine in the car, it all stirred feelings I wasn't supposed to have. I told myself I could keep the line clear, that I could be the adult, the mother, and steer us back to safety. But as the days passed, I realized I didn't want to. And that realization was the most dangerous of all. The morning after the lake, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Leo humming in the kitchen. He was making breakfast as he often did. His movements easy and confident. I watched him from the doorway, my heart swelling with a mix of pride and something deeper, something I was tired of denying. He turned, catching my gaze, and smiled, a smile that felt like it was just for me. "Morning," he said, sliding a plate of pancakes across the counter. "Thought you deserved a treat after yesterday." "You're spoiling me," I said, sitting down, trying to keep my tone light. But my voice trembled, and he noticed. He always noticed. We ate in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of knowing someone inside out. But beneath it, there was a hum of something new, something unspoken. I wanted to ask him about the lake, about the way he'd looked at me, about what he meant by everything he'd said. But I was afraid of the answers, afraid of what they'd mean for us. Instead, I threw myself into work. At school, I buried myself in counseling sessions, helping kids navigate their crushes and conflicts while ignoring the storm in my own heart. But every evening when I came home to Leo, the storm grew louder. He'd greet me with a hug, his arms lingering a little too long, or he'd sit close on the couch, our shoulders brushing as we watched a movie. Each touch, each glance, felt like a question, and I was running out of ways to avoid answering. A week after the lake, I couldn't take it anymore. We were in the living room, a half-eaten pizza between us, the TV droning in the background. Leo was telling me about a project he was working on, his eyes bright with passion. I watched him, marveling at the man he'd become, kind, brilliant, and so achingly present. The words slipped out before I could stop them. "Leo," I said, my voice soft, "what are we doing?" He paused, his expression shifting from surprise to something deeper, more vulnerable. "What do you mean?" he asked, though I could tell he knew. I gestured between us, my hands trembling. "This. The way things feel. It's not just mother and son anymore, is it?" He looked at me, his eyes steady but filled with something raw. "It hasn't been for a while," he said quietly. "Not for me." My breath caught. I wanted to look away, to retreat to the safety of denial, but I couldn't. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He leaned closer, his hand resting on mine. "It means I love you," he said. "Not just as my mom. You. The woman you are. The person I can't imagine my life without." The words hit me like a wave, washing away the last of my defenses. I felt heat rising in me, a mix of fear, guilt, and something else, something that felt like freedom. I should have pulled away, should have reminded him of who we were. But instead, I leaned into the moment, letting it carry me. "Leo," I said, my voice breaking, we can't." But even as I said it, I knew I didn't mean it. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face, his touch gentle but electric. "We can," he said softly. "If you want to." And I did. God help me, I did. The next day, I suggested we go back to the lake. I told myself it was for clarity, but deep down I knew it was for something else. We packed the same picnic, the same wine, and drove to the same secluded spot. The air was warm, the water shimmering under a cloudless sky. We set up our blanket, and Leo unpacked his fishing gear, but there was a new energy between us, a quiet understanding that we were here for more than a picnic. We ate, laughed, and drank, but the playful ease of our last visit was gone, replaced by something heavier, more deliberate. I felt his eyes on me, And I didn't shy away. When I stood to stretch, he followed, his movements slow, almost cautious. "Want to swim?" I asked, my voice teasing but my heart racing. He nodded, and we waded into the water, the coolness a sharp contrast to the heat in my chest. I splashed him, trying to recapture the lightness of before, but the game felt different now. He caught me, his hands on my waist, and we stood there, the water lapping around us, our breaths shallow. His eyes searched mine, asking a question I was finally ready to answer. And then it happened. Leo pulled me close, his arms strong and sure, and spun me in the water, our laughter mingling with the sound of the lake. When he stopped, his face was close, his breath warm against my skin. And then he kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, as if he was giving me a chance to pull away. But I didn't. I kissed him back, my hands tangling in his hair, the world falling away until it was just us. Two people, no labels, no boundaries, just love in its rawest form. The kiss deepened, and for the first time in years I felt alive, whole, seen. When we finally pulled apart, we were breathless, our foreheads pressed together. "I love you," he whispered, and I felt tears prick my eyes. "I love you too," I said, the words freeing something in me I'd kept locked away. We didn't speak of it again that day. We swam, laughed, and returned to our picnic, but everything was different. The line we'd crossed wasn't just blurred, it was gone. And as we drove home, his hand on mine, I knew there was no going back. Now, as I sit here writing this, I'm still grappling with what it means. Society would judge us, call it wrong, but in our quiet moments it feels right. Leo is my home, my heart, and whatever this is, it's ours. We're not a mother and son anymore, not a couple in the traditional sense. Just two souls who found each other in a world that doesn't understand. And for now, that's enough. Thank you for joining me on this journey. What would you do if love came in a form you never expected?